Hi everyone, this is just a quick video taking you through functional skills and how to interpret information. So this video is specifically going to look at the key skills needed for studying all aspects of English. So it doesn't matter if you're just studying functional skills, if you're studying ESOL, or if you're intending to go on to study GCSE English, all the things in these videos are going to help actually build those skills so that you can have success in each course. First thing we're going to look at is what we call writer's perspective. Now this is important when you're looking at any text within English. It's specifically very important when you're thinking about level 2 functional skills and also for GCSE as well. So when we think about the writer's perspective, we try and think about understanding the meaning behind the text, and we have to use the following skills to do that. The first one then is making inference. So this is the one that you do firstly when you actually read a text and you try to gain an understanding of what it's really about. So when we're making an inference, this is when we have a conclusion that is reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. Okay, so it's where you read something, you interpret the information, and you make certain assumptions based on the information that you have. Secondly then, we have skill 2, and this is about explicit information. So this is the kind of information that is clearly stated and it leaves nothing to be implied, and it's very obvious in the meaning. So for example, if we have a look at the phrase, "It was a dark and stormy night." Now that sentence, it uses explicit information that leaves no room for doubt. It tells us very clearly what kind of night it was and what the weather was doing in that instance. And skill 3, the final one, is implicit information. So if something is implicit, it's not directly stated, the reader must understand the implicit information and facts based on other clues in the text. So the actual word implicit comes from the word implied, and that often means that we need to read between the lines and try and think about the broader context surrounding the information that we've just read. Again, this is really important for functional skills, but specifically these are the key skills that you'll be learning to develop and actually build upon when you go on to study GCSE as well. Look at the extract and using the skills of inferencing, try to identify the implicit and explicit information. So the first thing you'll notice when we have a look at the extract is that it's clearly used a headline. So it says there, "Holiday from Hell." You can also see there as well that it's used a rhetorical question. So first things to think about there is that when you're looking at certain texts, especially when you're thinking about analysing things for GCSE, you have to start thinking about what kind of presentational, organisational, language or structural devices have been used. So first of all, we can see there that the rhetorical question is a language device, and it is also used the organisational structure of using a headline. So this should be able to tell us that we're going to be having a look at an article. The first part says then, "Is there such a thing as a perfect holiday? At this stage I'd settle for one with no waiting, suffering or struggling to erect a tent that seems to have a mind of its own. Holidays are simply the worst waste of time and money, and frankly we need to put a stop to them now. On our last holiday we stayed in a tent. That's right, a tent. It would be like taking an adventure," my mum had said enthusiastically. But sleeping in a muddy field wasn't as good as she had made out. The floor was hard and cold, the wind constantly biffed and battered our tent, leaving us in a constant state of terror. When we finally headed home, I could feel the joints of my bones almost shout out with anticipation. A proper bed, a real shower, these were the things I had taken for granted. Even school seemed like a welcome escape from the dreaded campsite. Somehow, amazingly, I even looked forward to GCSE revision. Now this is just a very typical example. They're focusing on the actual theme within this lesson, and if you can't think about what that is just yet, we're going to focus on the idea of holidays. So this part, the reading part, is going to focus on that, and also we're going to actually go deeper on it as well when we look at the writing attempt as well. So the next thing I want you to do, I want you to spend a little bit of time reading through this extract. When you're ready, when you think you know it quite well, a good idea to do is just to test yourself and have a look at the comprehension questions on the next part of the video. If you do need to go back at any point, please feel free to do so. It's important that you take your time and just practice those skills about identifying the implicit and the explicit pieces of information. Practice your reading skills by answering the following questions. So the first one says, how does the writer feel about holidays? Number 2, identify a quotation to support this viewpoint. Now, if you're not too sure what we mean when we talk about selecting a viewpoint, this is just going to be a piece of the actual text, a certain small part of the text that we're going to use as evidence to try and support this first idea. Number 3, what language technique has been used to express how he feels? If you're not too sure what we mean about language techniques, it's really important that you take the time to think about the other videos in these series that go into those in a bit more detail. Alternatively, we will go through some of them as well a little bit later on. Number 4, approximately how old is the writer during the holiday? And number 5, what is the mother's viewpoint about camping? If you'd like to pause the video now and take your time and go through the questions at your own pace, then please feel free to do so. There's nothing wrong if it takes you a little bit longer. It's all just about practicing those skills because they're really going to be important as you progress throughout English and also going on to level 1, level 2, and of course GCSE as well. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So the first question then was asking us, what did the writers think about holidays? What was his viewpoint? So the obvious response there would be, the writer seems to dislike holidays. And we got that really from the overall tone and sense that we got from the actual extract. Now what you need to do for the second question is to build on this idea and to find a piece of evidence or a quotation that supports that idea. So number 2, answers may include but are not limited to, holidays are simply the worst waste of time and money, and frankly, we need to put a stop to them now. Now you'll notice that when I've answered that question, I've put this sentence at the top here, which is, answers may include but are not limited to. And the reason why I've included that is because that is the typical kind of phrasing that you would see in the functional skills mark scheme. And the reason why we use that is because it might be that there are multiple answers that will get you a mark. So there are going to be several different versions that you could have used in order to actually get a correct answer. Number 3. So number 3 was asking us what language device or what language technique has been used in the question. And in the one that we used to answer question 2, the technique that was used is a superlative adjective. And you can see there I've included it in the parenthesis or the brackets. The word I was talking about there is the word worst. Now, if you're not too sure what we mean by superlatives, again, there are other videos within our channel that go into that in more detail. But essentially, a superlative is when a word states the highest or lowest extent of something. So a typical example is, you wouldn't say that someone is the bestest because you can't get better than the best. Similarly, you can't get worse than the worst. There's no such word as worstest. So it's the highest or lowest extent of something. Now this is a really important word to actually analyse because the word worst tells us just how bad he feels about these kind of holidays. He really doesn't like them, and we can really see that by his choice of adjective there. Number 4. So number 4 was asking us to try and work out approximately how old the actual writer was of this extract. Now it was quite a difficult one because the actual tone or the use of vocabulary that he was using was quite difficult. However, it was quite clear there that he should be about 15 or 16, even though his tone did sound quite grown up. The writer does state, I even look forward to GCSE revision, and the implication behind that is that he's nearing the end of secondary school. So that is another example of the implicit information, where we have to go ahead and think about reading between the lines and trying to really use the evidence to fill in the blanks and to understand the full picture. Number 5, final one. If you remember question 5, it was asking us to consider what the mother's viewpoint was of the holiday in a very typical fashion of mothers. she has said quite enthusiastically that it would be like going on an adventure. So we can see there that she's trying to be quite upbeat, quite enthusiastic, quite typical of mothers when they know that children don't really want to go off and do something that might be quite difficult or unpleasant. If you'd like to continue to develop your reading skills, then what you can do is you can check out the additional reading questions. You can see there on the left hand side, that is what the worksheet is going to look like, and we're also going to have a link available in the description where you can download it and you can answer a few more questions on the same topic and just practice a little bit of that reading skills, the making inferences, the implicit and explicit information. Even if you're someone who has already passed the reading level of your functional skills qualification, this is still a really important element that it's really good to go back over and keep on revising, because again, it's not only going to help you with level 1 and level 2 functional skills, it's also going to be very beneficial when you come to do GCSE English as well. Look at the writing task and attempt the challenges that follow. So what we've done here then, we're going to use the same kind of theme that we looked at for the reading section, and we're going to have a task or a scenario, and it's going to be based on the theme of holidays. So the first part says then, a holiday website is running a writing competition. In it, they are asking for people to write a review of a recent holiday or day trip they experienced. In the review, you should describe the place you visited, what activities are there, and what sights should you see. Advise people who may be considering going there, and give the holiday, the trip a star rating and justify the score you gave. Now, when we look at this kind of question, it's important to start thinking about a few questions, and those are going to be things like, what is the main focus of this question? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my yellow highlighter, I'm going to go back over this statement, and I'm going to think about what are the key areas that I really need to focus on. So the first bit that I would try to identify is the fact that it says to write a review. Now, a lot of students do get a little bit worried about the type of format that they're going to be required to write in their exam. However, this is not something you should worry about too much. Typically, the layout that you'll be following is going to be fairly similar for every single form. There's only going to be some minor adjustments as well, and we'll go over those in a little bit. Now, the next part, in terms of the actual challenge, is it says it needs to be about a recent holiday or a day trip. Now, many of us struggled during COVID, and it often meant that people weren't able to go on holiday, they had to cancel them, or they weren't able to go on day trips. And if that is that case, then there's no reason why you can't make one up, or think about one that may have happened a few years ago as well. It's absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with doing that. So now that we've understood the main focus of the question, let's think about the other things as well that we need to identify. Now, in every single writing exam question, you will get bullet points, and these bullet points will help you to actually focus on what you need to include in your response. So the first one says, describe the place you visited, what activities are there, and what sights should you see. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to highlight activities, and then the sights. So when we say the sights, we mean is there anything that is particularly spectacular or amazing about that area that you may have visited, any national monuments or anything like that that might be worth people going to see. Advise people who may be considering going there. Okay, so the first one really is this word advise. And we've really got to think carefully about what does that word mean. Now, if you're giving someone advice, you're not really demanding that they do something. Advice is a lot more gentle. You're giving them options. You use words like, it could be something you enjoy. You might like to go and see this, rather than being quite forceful with it. So the fact that it says that we must advise people tells us that our tone must be quite gentle and quite straightforward. And the final one, give the holiday trip a star rating and justify the score you gave. So a star rating, typically this would be out of 5. So again, 5 out of 5 would mean that it's a very good trip that you'd highly recommend. And obviously if it was only 1 out of 5, it's something that we wouldn't. When it says justify the score you gave, if you are giving it 1 out of 5, which is a terrible review, you need to tell us why. What's so bad about this place? And remember, a lot of the time with holidays as well, sometimes there are good aspects and sometimes there are bad aspects. So there's nothing wrong with writing a balanced argument as well. It can't always be amazing, and very rarely is it completely terrible and awful. So super challenge. I want you to think about what kind of presentational features or what kind of organisational features will you need to answer this question. And again, that can really be found or understood when you think about what kind of form you need to write in. So again, if we look back at the actual statement, it's told that we need to write a review. Typically this question will be worth about 21 marks. So you need to think about how many paragraphs you need to write. Again, every single response that you write for functional skills or GCSE English will be written in paragraphs. And you also need to make sure that you're using the correct organisational or presentational features as well. Mega challenge. What techniques would be effective for this kind of review? So if you're trying to sell me on a certain location or a certain holiday that I might go on myself or I might take my family on, this is something that actually could require quite a lot of money, time and planning. And if I'm going to commit to all of that extra things there, then you've really got to sell it for me. You've really got to tell me why should I go there or why shouldn't I go there, depending on how you want to actually phrase your response. If we think about the mega challenge that we just looked at the previous part of the video, we're thinking about the kind of techniques that you could use in your actual writing response. Now there are many different techniques that you can use in English. However, the main ones that you want to focus on for things like functional skills level 1, level 2, and even a good portion of GCSE English as well, are things like DAFORREST techniques. Now, a lot of the videos have gone through these in quite a bit of detail, so if you already know these, that's absolutely fantastic. However, it's really important that you go back over and just revise them, because when we are in an exam situation, it's really easy just to forget or make a very silly mistake that could ultimately impact our result in a negative way. So what you've got here then, you can see on the left hand side, I have the DAFORREST techniques, and on the right hand side, I have the definitions. Some of the definitions have been missing and some of the DAFORREST techniques are missing, so what I'd like you to do is just pause it now and to go through it at your own time and try and work out what goes into the correct space. Again, you may have gone through the DAFORREST techniques quite a bit, but it's really important to practice these as well and really think about the definition and the best way to possibly use them. If you'd like to pause the video now, then please feel free to do so. I'm now going to go ahead and go through the answers in the next part of the video. Class feedback. Check your answers against the completed table. So here we have all of our DAFORREST techniques then on the left hand side. So we have first of all our discourse marker. Now discourse marker is what I would say the D is. Some teachers will say that it's direct address. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, it just does change a little bit from teacher to teacher. So some will say discourse markers and some will say direct address. So for discourse markers then, these are words or phrases whose function it is to organise the discourse into segments. If you're not too sure what we mean by that, all it is words like however, on the other hand, and what it really does is help organise and actually shape the way our writing is going. A really fantastic way to use these is at the start of your paragraphs. So you could say firstly, secondly, thirdly, and then when you reach your conclusion, you can just say finally. So those are some typical ways that you can use discourse markers. We call those sequencing discourse markers. So those are good ones to use there, and it's a really easy way to get yourself a mark in your writing assessment. Alliteration. So this is repeating the same letter 2 or more times in close proximity to each other. So sometimes you might have sea and sand, for example, and then the alliteration there would be the repetition of the letter S. So even though we have the word and in between it, it would still count as alliteration because they are in close conjunction to each other. They are still quite closely connected. The next one is a fact. Now a lot of people often get confused on this, and we really don't know what topic or what subject is going to come up in your assessment. So you're not expected to know facts about absolutely everything that could possibly come up because it's just not realistic. But what you can do is state something as a fact, Even if it's not true, you'd still get a mark for trying to present your ideas as a fact. So a fact then is just very simply something that is true. So if you state something as if it is true, then you'll therefore be getting a mark as a fact. Next one is an opinion. Kind of works in the opposite way to a fact. So something that is just a viewpoint, it's not necessarily factually accurate, but it's really important to express our viewpoints because it's about making a personal connection to it. So for example, if I'm reading a review, I really want to know your opinion. I've taken the time to actually read what you have to say, and I want to know your viewpoint on it. Doesn't matter whether it's fact or not, I am trusting in your opinion and I want to actually hear it so that I can make my decision on whether to go and visit this place. Next one, repetition. So repeating a word or phrase for effect. So for example, if you were thinking like the example we looked at for the writing part of the video, it clearly didn't enjoy camping, so if it could say holiday from Hal, for example, it could use that in one paragraph and then repeat it in, let's say, the second or the third one as well. And just repeating a phrase or a keyword like that is a good way just to get your viewpoint across and really state how you feel about the topic you're talking about. Rhetorical question. So this is a question that doesn't require a verbal response. So it's good to actually ask the audience a question. They're not actually going to answer us, but what they'll be doing as they read is they'll start thinking about the question that you have actually given them. Emotive language. So this is the kind of language that generates an emotional response from the reader. So it is keywords that will actually trigger some emotion within them. Statistics, very similar to facts. The only difference really with it is that with statistics, we're using numerical data to support an argument. So this might be anything like a percentage, a decimal, or a fraction to try and justify whether something is either good or bad. For example, you could say, did you know that 95% of people that go to Spain have a wonderful experience? Now again, this isn't actually true. I don't know if it's true. It's just a statistic that I've made up to try and actually support my overall idea on the topic. Triplet or group of three, again, depending on your teacher, the wording might change a little bit of this one. This is generally considered to be 3 words or ideas that are used towards a common idea. So for example, if you think about the one about the camping, the writer clearly didn't like what he was going through. So you could say that the campsite was horrible, horrendous, and absolutely awful. So 3 ideas linked towards a common goal that try and clearly state the writer's point of view. Now what we're going to do is we're going to think about choosing the right technique. A really good thing to do when you're writing a review or any real form of writing is to try and have a bit of a plan. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a look at the image that you can see there on the right hand side. I'd like you to try and think, what kind of language could you use to describe it effectively? Think about it very carefully. Think about the kind of imagery that's coming across there, the bright, the vibrant colours, because if you do choose to carry on and do English up until GCSE level, you will have to do some creative writing based on an actual image. So something potentially like this. So if you'd like to take your time now, pause the video and come up with your own ideas, then that's absolutely fine. I'm going to go ahead now and show you some of the ideas that I came up with to describe this image. So the first one then, the trees seem to dance majestically in the gentle morning breeze. So I want you to think about that example. Think, is there any actual kind of language technique there? And what do we actually learn about the kind of words that have been used? Now, trees don't actually dance, but think about the imagery that that's creating there, this kind of gentle swaying backwards and forth, and it creates this kind of nice, gentle, relaxing kind of atmosphere as well. We've also got words like gentle, majestically, and things like that that has a real nice and pleasant sound to it as well. It gives us an overall relaxing tone, and it helps the reader get a good idea about what kind of break or holiday they might experience at this place. The beautiful scent of the ocean will help you forget all of your troubles. So if we're talking about scent, What we mean there is obviously the smell of the ocean, so that quite strong salty smell that you normally get. And what that is doing, it's engaging a really key technique as well. It's not one of our DAFORREST techniques, but it is a really important one when you're trying to create imagery, and that would be sensory language. So if you can engage the senses, that means smell, taste, touch, sight, and things like that, then it really helps to bring your writing to life as well. Who doesn't love a beach holiday? So nice, easy rhetorical question there. And the final one, you need to go on this holiday. It will be the best decision you ever make. So if you think about our previous example, when we were actually thinking about the camping holiday, the word that was used there to describe the camping holiday was actually worst, which is actually the opposite kind of word to this one. They're both superlatives because you can't get better than the best, because bestest doesn't make sense. When it was describing the camping holiday, it used the word worst, which is a superlative, and in this example we use the word best, which is a more positive superlative as well. Now, if you'd like to actually try and stretch and challenge yourself, you can try and add another example of your own. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start thinking about moving on and really trying to tackle this write and response. Use the teacher's example to help write your own response. So to start off, I've got a nice clear headline. It doesn't always have to be the most catchy thing in the world. You don't want to have to spend loads of time in the exam really trying to think about the best headline that you can use, because that really will eat into the time you have for your exam. Typically, if you're talking about level 1, level 2 functional skills, you're only going to get an hour to do this, so you don't really have to come up with the most catchy or most amazing headline that you can think of. Just make sure that you are using the right organizational features and that you're spending enough time on your actual response. So come to Cornwall, that's the first thing that we wrote. Ever wanted to experience the best of British holidays? Ever wanted to enjoy the amazing natural wonder of the UK? Then Cornwall is the place for you. Let me get straight to the point. Never before have I experienced a holiday with so much fun, sun and relaxation than when I was there with my family last summer. Beaches. Golden, soft and gentle sand will call to you as soon as you see the beach. The soothing smell of the sea wafts over you as you breathe it all in and feel your worries just melt away. So think about the actual tone that we're creating there. Think about if this actually effectively gives any advice, for example, because that was actually what it needed to do in the actual question that we were looking at. Is there any techniques that have been used there, or anything specifically that makes this effective to the audience? So now if we have a look back at our actual response, there you go, we've got the same one that we looked at there, and we're just going to go through and think about the success criteria. So in order to actually get a reasonable mark for this response, the candidate needs to write in the form of a review. So that's the first thing I want you to think about. Have they wrote in a form of a review? What kind of things did we say they needed to use in terms of the organisation and the layout of the review? Now, one of the things they said was that you had to use a star review, and we can see there that there's got no kind of indication for it. However, it is only the first 2 paragraphs. So this is something I'd expect further on, later on, closer to the actual conclusion of the writing as well. They have, however, clearly separated their writing into paragraphs. There is a very clear headline and also a subheading as well to organise the information. Writing clear, concise paragraphs. Now this is something that a lot of people do, even way up to GCSE level as well. A lot of people just try to get a lot of information down in one big paragraph, and that is really something you should try to avoid. We can see here that the paragraphs, even though it looks quite big on the screen, is actually quite nicely laid out. We can clearly see that the start of it is a bit of an introduction, and we know that the next one is moving on to talk specifically about the beaches. So in terms of that success criteria, it seems to have met it quite well. Use a range of language techniques effectively. So there are actually quite a few different language techniques that were used in this one. And the first one that we might notice here is a rhetorical question. And that happens right in the very first sentence in the response. So, ever wanted to experience the best of British holidays? So we've got a rhetorical question here, and we've also got a slight example of alliteration when you've got best and then British. You can see that there because they're in close proximity to each other. Ever wanted to enjoy the amazing natural wonder of the UK? Again, another rhetorical question. Now, it's good to actually use techniques. It's really good that they've actually started off and used some rhetorical questions to engage the reader. That's fantastic. But you don't want to just use the same techniques over and over again. So this response has used a rhetorical question twice. As an examiner, I'm really looking for them now to use a few more different techniques in order to get a reasonable mark. Then Cornwall is the place for you. Let me get straight to the point. Never before have I experienced a holiday with so much fun, sun and relaxation. So you can see here we've actually got a triplet or a group of three. So you have fun, sun and relaxation there as well. Beaches. Golden, soft and gentle sand will call to you as soon as you see the beach. Now, a beach can't literally call to you. The technique they've used here is called personification, and it's also used a lot of sensory language here. Who doesn't like the idea of golden, soft sand? It sounds very enticing, so it's a really good way to actually try to engage the reader as well. It sounds very positive, using that sensory language to create such bright and positive imagery as well. The soothing smell of the sea wafts over you. So we've got soothing smell. Nice form of alliteration there, and of course it's sensory language again. Wafts over you as you breathe it all in and you feel your worries just melt away. Now you notice for this one as well with the tone of it, it's not forcing us to actually go on this. It's not saying you must go and visit this place. It's being quite gentle and quite relaxed. But what we would like to see as the response carries on is that we need to see towards the end an actual star rating so that it stays with the actual form of a review, and to actually start giving a little bit more advice. Right now it's just simply creating a lot of description, and we'd hopefully like to see it to go a little bit further in the form of advising as well. Have the correct spelling, punctuation and grammar. So again, that's another thing that a lot of people neglect as well. One of the real good things that you can use to actually make sure that you're using a range of punctuation is to think about using things like your colons and semicolons. Now these are typically quite difficult to use, so a really good technique to use is by using this sentence here. Let me get straight to the point, and following it by a colon. So the dot and the dot, what looks like a full stop on top of another full stop, will be our colon there, and that's to indicate a list. So we're going to list the things that he wants to point out, the main focus of the writing, and that is never before has he experienced a holiday with so much fun, sun and relaxation, and so forth. Okay, so even though it's only listing one thing that he got from the holiday or one thing that he really wants to state about the holiday, it still actually will show a range of punctuation in the response as well. Have one clear point in each paragraph. A lot of people tend to think that if their paragraph is too short, that they need to pad it out, but you should try and resist this temptation. If a paragraph is short, it just means it's time to move on. It might mean that if you get a little bit more time at the end of the exam, that you could add an extra paragraph in there as well, but don't just force in information for the sake of forcing information. It doesn't help if you just seem like you're waffling on and you're kind of a little bit all over the place. So just make sure that if you are making one clear point in your paragraph, that you leave it there and you move on to the next point you're trying to make. And the final one is use a range of varied vocabulary to make your writing engaging. So if we're doing a review, and in this one specifically we're trying to say that this is a really positive thing to do, that you should really go on this holiday, I want to see some really good words there to actually justify it. So even in the first paragraph there, we've got words like amazing. So it's not just saying it's nice, it's fun, it's interesting. Amazing is a much more positive word to use to describe the holiday. So think very carefully about the kind of vocabulary that you're using in it, because it can be a little bit tricky as well. A good thing to do if you think you're done is to go back over and just double check some of the words and think, are they the best words that I can use? Are they more advanced words? Because not only do you get a mark for the vocabulary, you'll also get a mark for being able to spell it correctly as well. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to use everything that we've covered so far in this video, and I want you to try and get some practice in your own writing response as well. So we're going to use the exact same question that we just looked at, and if you do need some extra help or support, then do use the other part of the video where we went through the teacher's example. You notice at the bottom as well that if you do want feedback, then you can leave us a comment and try and get in touch, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. You can always email us some work, we'll mark it and try and give you some feedback as well. So if we think back to the actual question that we looked at a moment ago, so it says a holiday website is running a writing competition. In it, they're asking for people to write a review of a recent holiday or day trip they experienced. So as we said before, it doesn't have to be something that really happened. You can just make it up and try and be a little bit creative if you want to. In your review, you should describe the place you visited and think about the kind of activities that are there and what sites could they go and see. Advise people who may be considering to go there. Give the holiday or the trip a star rating and justify the score you gave. Now, if this is the actual question that's worth 21 marks, you have to remember that for level 1 or for level 2, you'll have about an hour to do the exam. If it's worth about 21 marks, you want to spend about half an hour writing the response. So if you're going to go ahead and practice this yourself, a good habit to get into is just to get used to timing yourself as well, because it's nothing like actually getting that experience and just pretending you're in that exam situation. It's all well and good being able to write something, when you have loads and loads of time, but actually trying to do something to a time frame is a really good thing to do, just to challenge and practice how you're going to get on in the actual exam. If you need any additional support or help, then new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, you can leave us a comment below or like and subscribe, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Alternatively, you can check out our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much, guys, and please do let us know if you've got any questions or queries about your upcoming assessments or exams. We're here to help you, so anything you ask, we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you.